Number 8. Robert Mesa Jr. 18-year-old Danielle Mesa and her boyfriend, 19-year-old Seren Bryan, were reported missing by Danielle's father in August 2018. The couple lived with him in Clinton Township, Michigan, and he hadn't seen or heard from them in several days. Then, later that same evening, another household member noticed a foul odor coming from a shed on the family's property. And inside the shed were several garbage bags containing Danielle and Seren's dismembered remains. By the time police named Danielle's brother, Robert Jr., as a suspect, he'd fled the state. Luckily, though, he was apprehended at a Greyhound bus station in Cincinnati, Ohio. Robert's attorney argued in court that his client suffered from mental illnesses, including bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. But experts concluded that Robert was sane when he killed Danielle and Seren, effectively barring him from arguing that he was not guilty by reason of insanity. In the end, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to 2 life terms without parole. A court upheld Robert's guilty verdict and sentence in 2021 after a failed attempt to overturn his conviction based on his mental illness. Number 7. Ross Paul Emch. In early 2020, a man went to the police in Mesa, Arizona and reported that his brother, 36-year-old Ross Paul Emch, was threatening his life. The victim already had a restraining order against Ross stemming from a dispute over inheritance money from their grandparents. And according to a probable cause statement, Ross felt that his brother didn't deserve to receive an inheritance. 4 months later, Ross's girlfriend warned police that he planned to do something. More specifically, she said that Ross was planning to wreak havoc on his brother's life until the victim repaid the inheritance money and dropped the order of protection. Police warned Ross to obey the restraining order and advised him to let go of his anger over the inheritance situation. But he allegedly violated the order just weeks later when he sent a threatening email to the victim emphasizing his willingness to go to prison. He also warned that the victim and his family's life and safety depended on him fulfilling Ross's demands. One of Ross's other brothers, Patrick, told Fox 10 Phoenix that Ross had been given up for adoption as a child. He came around as an adult and changed his name to Emch and allegedly forged documents to become a beneficiary of the will and deeded his grandparents' house to himself for just $10. According to the news outlet, documents showed that Ross spent copious amounts of money gambling after their grandfather's death and wrote checks to himself for tens of thousands of dollars. Ross Emch was charged with theft by extortion, stalking, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and computer tampering. But unfortunately, the outcome of the case is unclear. Number 6. Antonio Swanson. 26-year-old Wilnita Hill was shot dead in broad daylight on a Cleveland street in October 2019. She and her boyfriend had just rolled up to her father's house when her brother, 32-year-old Antonio Swanson, began spraying bullets at the young woman. Wilnita's boyfriend returned fire, but the shooter escaped on a bicycle. In the days leading up to her murder, Wilnita had gotten entangled in a dispute with Swanson, who accused her of taking a car he'd just bought. According to court documents, Antonio had threatened to kill Wilnita. But luckily, he was captured by U.S. Marshals 5 days after he gunned down his sister. During his arraignment on murder and weapons charges, Antonio called his indictment ridiculous and said he wanted to go straight to jail. He also tried pleading not guilty due to insanity, but the judge said it wasn't possible at that point in the court process. Swanson eventually pleaded guilty to reduced involuntary manslaughter and felony assault charges, and in the end he was sentenced to a minimum of 10 years in prison for the manslaughter charge and 7 years for the assault count. He's currently slated to be released in 2039. Number 5. The Fuss Family. From an early age, it was clear that Charles Fuss, the adopted son of Jackie and Bill Fuss, struggled with profound mental issues, and by the time he began showing symptoms, the Fuss family was in constant turmoil. The 4 children didn't get along in the slightest. As soon as they were old enough, all of the kids except for Charles got married and moved out of the family's home in Decatur, Georgia. Charles was in his 20s and had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Prone to sudden outbursts and other unpredictable behavior, he was unable to support himself financially, so his mother Jackie took care of him. Their relationship was toxic, and Bill Fuss had died of cancer in the early 1990s, leaving the two on their own to sort out their disagreements. In 1995, Jackie remarried and moved in with her new husband, leaving Charles alone in the family home. He was angry that he no longer had his mother to himself, even though Jackie still stopped by to check on him. During a visit one day in 1996, Charles swung an axe into Jackie's head during an argument over an $1,800 phone bill that Charles had racked up from calling adult talk hotlines. Police captured him 9 days later in Arkansas, where he was trying to hitchhike to California. Charles was found guilty of murder but was deemed mentally ill. He was sentenced to 10 years to life in prison, leaving the 3 remaining Fuss children, David, Margaret, and Melissa, to quarrel over their parents' estate, which had been left behind without a will. In June of 1999, 3 years after Jackie's murder, David Fuss's wife Kelly was brutally murdered in her own home, having been stabbed more than 30 times after being attacked while she was on the toilet doing a crossword puzzle. After clearing David of any wrongdoing, authorities arrested Margaret Fuss, Melissa Fuss, and Melissa's incestuous lover, Joel Dominguez, who also happened to be her biological brother, who grew up in another household. Prosecutors accused the trio of killing Kelly because she got in the way of their mother's estate dealings, and because they didn't expect her to be at home when they went there to take back some of Jackie's items that they felt David had stolen. All 3 suspects refused to talk, making it difficult to secure convictions against them. But the most damning evidence investigators could find pointed toward Joel Dominguez as the actual killer. He was found guilty of malice murder and was sentenced to 20 years to life. Margaret Fuss pleaded guilty to a lesser count of manslaughter and received a 10-year prison sentence, while Melissa Fuss turned state's witness against Joel in exchange for a reduced burglary conviction. As a result, she was also sentenced to 10 years. Number 4. The Yom Kippur Murders. Wealthy businessman Gerald Woodman and his wife Vera raised their 5 children in the upscale Los Angeles suburb of Brentwood. And in addition to being financially successful, the Woodmans had a rock-solid marriage and a happy home life, or so it seemed. As a natural Type A personality, Jerry was controlling toward his wife and kids behind closed doors, and he was harsher on some family members than others. He had a soft spot for his daughters and youngest son, while being especially demanding toward his 2 oldest sons, Neil and Stuart. Over the years, the 2 brothers developed a close bond over their shared frustrations over how their father treated them. And when they reached adulthood, Jerry tried to smooth out their fractured relationships by hiring Neil and Stuart to run one of his companies. When Jerry was hospitalized following a heart attack, the brothers discovered that their father was skimming higher amounts of money than he'd previously admitted to as part of an embezzlement scam all 3 were participating in together. Neil and Stuart filed a lawsuit and wrestled control of the business away from Jerry, and once again, they became estranged from their parents. One night in 1985, Jerry and Vera were shot dead at point-blank range in a parking garage by 2 men dressed as ninjas as they arrived home from a Yom Kippur dinner. Consumed by greed and anger, Neil and Stuart had hired brothers Steve and Robert Homick, along with Mike Dominguez and Sonny Majory, to kill their parents in a bid to collect on a $500,000 life insurance policy in Jackie's name. And as it turned out, their business was deeply in debt, and they needed the insurance money in order to set their finances straight. Everyone involved received life sentences except Steve Homick, who was sentenced to death. He died from natural causes in 2014 while on death row at San Quentin. Stuart Woodman died that same year from diabetes, almost 29 years to the day after the cold-blooded double murder. Number 3. The murder of Nancy Jane Harville. In early 2013, investigators unearthed the murdered body of a mother of 2 named Nancy Jane Harville. Originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, Harville was killed in Arkansas back in 2011, nearly a year and a half earlier. Her murderers, identified as her stepmother Sherry Bowen and her stepbrothers John and Christopher Aldrich, had kept up the illusion that Nancy was alive by impersonating her online on social media. They also pretended to be her through emails and by renewing her health insurance using her identifying information. Police finally found Harville's remains after receiving a tip about her possible death and whereabouts. According to authorities, John Aldrich admitted to killing Harville in a physical altercation that broke out during a disagreement about the treatment of her 2 kids. Christopher Aldrich and Sherry Bowen were subsequently charged as John's alleged co-conspirators. The three suspects blamed Harville for her stepfather's death, which was attributed to natural causes. An arrest report stated that Sherry Bowen instructed John and Christopher Aldrich to hog-tie the victim. The trio then proceeded to beat and torture Harville with various objects, including their hands, baseball bats, broomsticks, cast iron pans, hot candle wax, and an airsoft gun. Then, after Harville died, the suspects wrapped her in plastic and buried her in the backyard. And they told anyone who might be looking for her that she left the state with someone they didn't know. Sherry Bowen pleaded guilty to murder and various other charges and received a 30-year sentence. John Aldrich was sentenced to 40 years for first-degree murder, kidnapping, and several other counts. Christopher Aldrich was convicted of kidnapping, battery, and abuse of a corpse, and received a 20-year sentence as a consequence. Number 2. Sonia and Damon Bamberg. Allison Nicole Nikki Bamberg and her husband Damon Bamberg had a contentious marriage that eventually ended in separation and plans for a divorce. One night in 2008, after moving into her apartment in Hazelhurst, Georgia, Nikki and Damon met up to do a custody exchange. Their divorce had just been finalized, but they were no closer to being peaceful toward one another than they had been at the beginning of the drama. Not surprisingly, the soon-to-be exes got into a disagreement during what was supposed to be a quick and painless exchange. While driving home from the convenience store where the planned meeting had taken place, Nikki was talking to her father on the phone. Suddenly, she said someone had shot out the rear window of her car. The shooting then continued, and Nikki stopped talking all of a sudden. On her father's end of the call, it sounded like she'd dropped the phone. Unwilling to let go of the argument, Damon Bamberg had allegedly chased Nikki down and shot her with his mother, Sonia, in the car. He then left his estranged wife's body on the roadside while he went to the local sheriff's department and filed a complaint against her regarding a fight that had occurred earlier that day. Nikki was later found with 2 gunshot wounds to the head and neck. Damon was the first person to be charged in connection with Nikki's death, but Sonia Bamberg wasn't dragged into the mess by simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to witnesses, she played an active role in the ongoing feud between Damon and Nikki. Those who knew the parties involved told police that Sonia threatened Nikki on several occasions. She also allegedly offered people money to kill her daughter-in-law. After being arrested on suspicion of Nikki's murder, Damon initially maintained his innocence, but he allegedly admitted his guilt to fellow inmates and confessed that his mom was directly involved in the plot. Further investigation revealed that a life insurance policy had been taken out in Nikki's name, with Sonia as the sole beneficiary. Furthermore, in the Bamberg's home, police found a calendar with the date of Nikki's murder marked with a sad face and the words, "Hell begins." Damon and Sonia Bamberg were both found guilty of Nikki's murder and were each sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. Number 1. Roby Severe. In August 2023, a 37-year-old Florida man named Roby Severe was arrested on suspicion of killing his sister over a power bill. According to police, Severe shot one of his sisters and hurt another during a disagreement at 10:30 a.m. at their home in Pine Hills. Severe allegedly dialed 911 and admitted to shooting the victim before deputies arrived at the scene. The surviving sister, who was taken to the hospital with severe head injuries, reportedly told police that Severe became angry at her and the victim over an electricity bill. She accused Severe of retrieving a gun from his bedroom, forcing his way into another room that the sisters were in, and physically attacking them by punching them and hitting them with the gun. Severe then allegedly shot Miguel Brown in the head as she tried to stand up, and afterward he left the room and called 911. Sadly, Brown died from her injuries, and the other sister will likely be permanently disfigured by her wounds. But drama is nothing new in the family, according to court documents. After the 3 siblings' mother died several years earlier, they wound up in court over a disagreement about whether to keep or sell the family home. The case was ongoing at the time of Severe's arrest on suspicion of murder. According to the most recent update on the murder case, Severe remains behind bars pending the outcome of his next court date. Would you rather become estranged from your family but live in the same town, or have a close relationship with your loved ones but live halfway around the world from each other? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.